My knuckles were white, gripping the steering wheel so hard my fingers ached. The minivan's wipers fought a losing battle against the heavy Wyoming snow, each sweep a rhythmic groan against the glass. Outside, the Christmas lights strung on passing houses blurred into watercolor smears of red and green, reflecting like broken promises on the wet windshield. "You okay, Miranda?" Elias asked, his voice quiet. He reached over and put his hand on mine. His grip was steady, the calloused palm of a paramedic a stark contrast to my trembling. I forced my fingers to relax, just a little. "Fine," I lied. The word came out tight. "Just tired of this snow." He didn't call me on the lie, just gave my hand a gentle squeeze before pulling away. He knew. He knew exactly what awaited us at my parents' pristine colonial, with its perfect symmetrical wreaths and the professionally installed lighting that probably cost more than our entire holiday budget. In the back seat, our children, Alara and Julian, were a bundle of nervous energy. They clutched their homemade offerings, peppermint brownies wrapped in simple parchment paper, tied with candy cane-striped ribbons they'd picked out themselves. Julian, 7 years old and never still, bounced his legs against the back of my seat. "Mom, are they gonna like the brownies?" he asked, his small fingers tracing the reindeer he'd drawn on one of the hand-colored cards. "Of course they will, honey," I said, trying to inject a cheerfulness I didn't feel. Alara, my 9-year-old, nodded solemnly. "Remember what we talked about?" I said, glancing at them in the rearview mirror as we turned into my parents' long, plowed driveway. "Christmas isn't about expensive gifts. It's about being together," Alara finished, her voice carrying a wisdom that broke my heart. "Presents, not presents." She repeated our new family mantra, the phrase we'd been clinging to like a life raft ever since Elias's ambulance service cut all overtime hours 3 months ago. That cut had been a brutal blow, turning our careful budget into a monthly tightrope walk. My throat tightened as I put the van in park. The modest, love-filled offerings in our arms suddenly felt impossibly small, impossibly heavy. Each step toward that gleaming front door, adorned with a wreath that dripped with frosted pine cones and velvet ribbons, felt like a walk toward a firing squad. If you're watching this video, tell me where you're from or what time it is for you. Before my finger could even press the illuminated doorbell, the heavy oak door swung open. My mother, Cynthia Harrington, stood framed in the warm light of the foyer. She was, as always, immaculate. Her cream-colored cashmere sweater was flawless, a string of pearls resting at her throat. Her smile was a thin, tight line that didn't come anywhere near her eyes. She surveyed us on the doorstep, her gaze flicking from my practical snow boots to the simple parchment-wrapped brownies in my hands. "There you are," she said, her voice crisp. She leaned in and brushed a cold, papery kiss against my cheek, the scent of her expensive perfume enveloping me. "You're late. The snow, I assume." "Hi, Mom. Merry Christmas," I said, stepping inside as the kids hurried past her. "Merry Christmas, Grandma," Julian chirped, holding up his offering. Cynthia glanced at the package as if it were a curious artifact. "Oh, how thoughtful. You can put those by the appetizers." She gestured vaguely toward the dining room. As we unwrapped from our coats, she turned to me. "Now, Miranda, just to be clear, we all agreed this year. No gifts." She emphasized the words, her eyes sharp. "Your father and I decided it's all just too much consumerism. We're focusing on family." A wave of relief, so potent it was almost embarrassing, washed over me. For weeks I had been sick with dread, terrified that our financial constraints would be laid bare and mocked. I'd had nightmares of my children's faces as they watched their cousins open piles of treasure. "That's right, Mom. No gifts." I nodded, the knot of tension in my shoulders finally starting to ease. "That's what we told the kids. They just made some brownies and cards for you and Dad." "How lovely," she murmured, already turning away. "Well, come in, come in. Your father is in his study." The house smelled overpoweringly of pine and spiced cinnamon, a perfect staged Norman Rockwell scene. I followed Elias and the kids into the dining room. There, on a massive mahogany sideboard, sat a gleaming silver tray of catered hors d'oeuvres. Smoked salmon blinis, prosciutto-wrapped asparagus, tiny, perfect crab cakes. I placed our humble peppermint brownies on the very end of the table. They looked small and childish next to the crystal serving dishes. Alara carefully arranged their handmade cards on the hall table, her face serious with concentration. Julian, however, just stared into the living room at the enormous, perfectly decorated Christmas tree, which was surrounded by nothing. No presents, just as she'd said. The dread in my stomach began to unwind. Maybe this year would be different. Maybe it would actually be okay. "Can we go play in the basement, Mom?" Julian asked, already bored. "Sure, honey, just use indoor voices," I said. The next 20 minutes ticked by in a slow-motion blur of small talk. Dad, Richard, emerged from his study, patted Julian awkwardly on the head, and gave Alara a slightly more enthusiastic hug. He immediately launched into a story about his golf partner. "Got a new driver, Miranda. Carbon fiber," he announced, swirling the ice in his glass of scotch. "Cost a fortune, but you can feel the difference." I nodded and smiled, my gaze drifting to the clock. Elias was trapped by the fireplace, fielding an interrogation from my mother about his career prospects. "Are you sure this paramedic field is stable, Elias?" she asked, her tone implying it was anything but. "It seems so high risk. Have you considered a management role or sales?" "I love what I do, Cynthia," Elias said, his voice polite but firm. Just as I was about to rescue him, the front door burst open without a knock, a gust of icy air sweeping into the perfect warm house. "We're here," my younger sister Talia trilled, sweeping in like a winter storm. She was a whirlwind of designer label winter white, shrugging off a coat that I knew for a fact cost more than our monthly mortgage payment. Her husband, Leo, followed dutifully behind her, his arms completely obscured by a mountain of glossy silver shopping bags and enormous professionally wrapped boxes tied with glittering gold bows. Trailing them were their 2 teenage sons, Trevor and Timothy, their faces already illuminated by the blue light of brand new phones. They grunted a greeting and immediately slumped onto a sofa, thumbs flying. My heart stopped. I felt the blood drain from my face. "Talia! Leo, you've arrived!" My mother, Cynthia, clapped her hands together like an excited child. Her entire demeanor changed, the tight smile replaced by a genuine beaming grin. "Wonderful! We were just waiting for you. Now we can open gifts." The words struck me like a physical blow. I couldn't breathe. I looked at Elias. His jaw was tight, a muscle clenching just below his ear. He gave an almost imperceptible shake of his head. From the basement stairs, Alara and Julian emerged, drawn by the commotion. Their faces, flushed from playing, were etched with confusion as they watched their cousins start to deposit an avalanche of presents under the tree. The empty space I had been so relieved to see was now disappearing under a sea of glitter and ribbon. "Mom," I said, my voice barely a whisper. I walked over to her, trying to keep my voice steady, trying not to make a scene. "Mom, I thought we agreed. No gifts." My father, Richard, overheard me and let out a long, dramatic sigh. "Oh, don't start, Miranda. Don't be difficult. You always take things too seriously." Talia, overhearing him, shot me a pitying smirk as she adjusted her cashmere sweater. "Relax, Miranda. It's Christmas. We just did what we could, you know? Just a few little things for the kids. Don't be so dramatic." "A few little things?" I whispered, staring at the pile that now reached halfway up the tree. "All right, everyone, find a spot," Cynthia announced, her voice ringing with excitement. "Talia, dear, you hand them out." My children stood frozen at the edge of the living room, two small, forgotten islands in an ocean of wrapping paper. Ilara clutched her own handmade card, the one she had spent an hour coloring, so tightly in her hand that the paper was crinkling. Julian had inched backward until he was pressed against my leg, his small hand slipping into mine. For the next half hour, we were forced to watch. Trevor and Timothy tore through the paper with practiced, almost bored efficiency. "Sweet, an Apple Watch Ultra!" Trevor shouted, already strapping it to his wrist. "It's the new Omen gaming laptop," Timothy yelled, holding the box aloft. "The one with the 4090 card." "That one cost $800, Richard announced to the room with a proud chuckle. "But worth every penny for his grades." Talia then presented her sons with theatrical flair. 4 tickets to an all-inclusive ski resort in Vail, and on it went. Designer hoodies, expensive noise-canceling headphones, gift cards worth hundreds of dollars. With each gift, I felt a piece of my children's bright Christmas morning spirit dim. Ilara's eyes, which had been so proud of her brownies, were now dull. She stared at the floor, her bottom lip trembling. Julian just hit his face against my leg. They were invisible. No one spoke to them. No one looked at them. Talia and my parents cooed and exclaimed over every single expensive item, creating a tight, impenetrable circle of celebration that pointedly excluded us. The festive, wrapping paper shredding chaos finally subsided. Trevor and Timothy were already absorbed in their new electronics. Talia was taking a selfie with my mother, both of them holding up champagne flutes. I felt Elias's hand on the small of my back. "Miranda," he said softly, "let's go." But I couldn't. Not yet. I walked over to my mother, who was admiring the diamond earrings Leo had surprised Talia with. "Mom," I said, my voice low and shaking with a cold fury I hadn't known I possessed. "You lied to me." Cynthia turned, her smile faltering, replaced by an instant look of annoyance. "Miranda, honestly, don't ruin the evening. You told me no gifts. We agreed. I made my children leave their gifts from us at home. I told them we were just spending time together. And then you do this. You set us up." "Set you up?" she scoffed, placing her champagne flute on the mantel. "That is an absurd accusation. Talia and I spoke, and she simply insisted. It's not my fault she's generous and you're, well, and you couldn't have called me?" I demanded. "You couldn't have given me a heads up?" "You chose to let my children walk in here with their homemade cookies and be humiliated." "Humiliated?" Talia chimed in, walking over and looping her arm through Mom's. "Who's humiliated?" "I'm not humiliated. You're the one making this a scene. It's just stuff, Miranda. Why do you always have to make everything about money?" The hypocrisy of the statement, coming from a woman dripping in new diamonds and holding a $3,000 handbag, was so profound it almost made me laugh. "This isn't about money, Talia," I said, my voice dangerously quiet. "This is about lying. This is about respect. This is about my children, who are standing right over there feeling like they're worthless because they didn't bring a laptop." "Oh, stop it," Richard boomed, finally looking up from his phone. "You're being hysterical. You're the responsible one, Miranda. You're always so practical. We've always said that about you." He said it like a compliment, but it landed like an insult. Responsible. The consolation prize for being less loved, the word they used when they needed me to co-sign a loan, or cover a bill, or give up my summer plans so Talia could go to a cheerleading camp. The responsible one who was expected to absorb every slight, every inequality, and smile while doing it. Something inside me, held taut for decades, finally snapped. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't cry. The rage was so cold and so clear, it made me perfectly calm. I turned away from my speechless family, walked over to my children, and knelt. "Ilara, Julian, go get your coats on. We're going home." Ilara's head snapped up, her eyes wide with a mixture of confusion and dawning relief. "Now?" Yes, now. But Miranda, Cynthia protested, her voice rising in genuine surprise. We haven't even had dessert. I made your father's favorite cherry pie. I stood up and faced her. Elias was already at the hall closet, pulling our coats from the tangled pile of designer wool. You can enjoy our brownies for dessert, I said. My voice was steady, unfamiliar even to my own ears. Merry Christmas. You're leaving? You're just leaving, Talia sputtered, her face a mask of indignation. Because of presents? That is so petty. You're punishing your kids because you're jealous. I paused at the door, Julian's small, mittened hand in mine. Alara already huddled next to Elias by the minivan. You're wrong, Talia, I said, looking my sister, my mother, and my father dead in the eyes. I'm not punishing them. I'm protecting them. From this. I didn't yield. I didn't apologize. I didn't explain. I just turned my back on their shocked, outraged faces, walked out into the falling snow, and closed the door behind me. The freedom of that small, quiet rebellion tasted sweeter than any cherry pie. The drive home was silent for the first 10 minutes. The only sound was the thwack-thwack of the wipers and the crunch of our tires on the fresh snow. The kids were quiet in the back, the shock of the evening settling over them. I was gripping the wheel again, but for a different reason. My hands were shaking, this time from adrenaline. You did the right thing, Elias said softly, his hand resting on the center console. I nodded, unable to speak. I was replaying the scene over and over, my mother's stunned face, Talia's rage, my father's sputtering disbelief. I had waited my entire adult life for that moment to just walk away. Then, from the back seat, Julian's small, hesitant voice broke the silence. Mom? Yes, honey? Are we poor? The question hit me like a physical punch, winding me. I sucked in a sharp breath. All my life I had tried to protect them from this. From the casual cruelty of my family, from the poisonous comparisons, from this exact feeling. And I had failed. I met Elias's eyes in the rearview mirror. A lifetime of shared understanding passed between us in that single, heartbreaking glance. I pulled the van over to the side of the quiet, snow-covered road and put it in park. I turned around in my seat to face them. No, Julian, we are not poor, I said, my voice thick. Do not ever think that. Do you understand me? He nodded, but his eyes were still uncertain. You're cousins, I said, choosing my words with extreme care. Got a lot of stuff tonight. Stuff is just things. It breaks. It gets old. It gets forgotten in a closet. I reached back and squeezed his knee. What you and Alara made, those brownies, those beautiful cards, you made those with your time and your hands and your hearts. That is not stuff. That is a gift, a real one. Alara, who had been staring out her window, turned to look at me. But they didn't like them. That's not because your gifts weren't good enough, sweetie, Elias said, his voice firm and warm. That's because they weren't. I swallowed the lump in my throat. We just believe that some things are worth more than stuff, I said, like being honest and being kind and loving each other, and we, our family, right here in this car, we are richer than any of them. You got that? A tiny smile flickered on Alara's face. Julian nodded, his expression serious. Okay, Mom. As I pulled back onto the road, driving away from the house that had never, ever felt like home, I realized the crushing weight I'd been carrying for decades wasn't obligation. It wasn't responsibility. It was the burden of letting them diminish me, of letting them make me, and by extension my family, feel less than. And for the first time in my entire adult life, I felt it beginning to lift. Sleep was impossible. I lay beside Elias, his breathing deep and even. He was exhausted, his last shift stretching into 14 hours, but my mind was a roaring hurricane. I felt weightless, hollowed out, not with grief, but with a strange crystalline clarity. I slipped from the bed, my feet silent on the cold hardwood floor. The house was quiet. Down the hall, my children were sleeping peacefully. In the kitchen, I padded over to the counter, the blue glow of the microwave clock reading 1:17 a.m. I filled the electric kettle, the hum shattering the silence. I reached for a box of chamomile tea, my mother's standard recommendation for any crisis. "Tea soothes everything, Miranda," she'd always say, usually while completely ignoring whatever problem I was trying to talk about. I scoffed, pushed the chamomile aside, and grabbed the dark roast coffee grounds. I needed to be sharp. While the coffee brewed, I sat at the kitchen table and opened my laptop. The screen glowed to life. I opened my banking app. I knew abstractly that I'd been covering things for them for years. Just temporary was my family's favorite phrase. But I had never, not once, added it all up. I'd been too afraid to. Tonight I wasn't afraid. I was furious. I set my filter to transactions and started scrolling back. Months turned into years. The evidence accumulated like snowdrifts against a door I could no longer force open. There it was, 13 months ago, a charge for $1,500. Harrington Colonial Property Insurance. I remembered the call from Dad. "We're just between accounts right now, sweetie. Can you cover this? Just temporary. I'll pay you back next month." He never had. Next, the monthly charges. My mother's cell phone. $70 every single month for 4 years. "We're just trying to figure out a better plan, Miranda," she'd promised. "This is just until we get it sorted." 4 years of sorting. Then I saw it. September 15th, a direct bank transfer. $1,200. The memo line. Talia, emergency. The $1,200 transfer. My blood ran cold. I remembered that day with perfect clarity. A tearful, frantic call from Talia. "Miranda, oh my God, I'm at the dentist. It's an emergency. I cracked a molar and they have to do a crown and Leo's card just got declined and they want the money up front. Can you please help me? I'm in so much pain. I'll pay you back on the 1st. I swear on my life." I'd transferred the money within an hour, sick with worry for her. She never paid me back. I'd forgotten about it, written it off as just Talia being Talia. Now, sitting in my dark kitchen, a cold suspicion bloomed in my chest. I opened my web browser. I navigated to Instagram. I went to Talia's profile. Her account was private, but she had, of course, accepted my follow request ages ago so I could see her perfect life. I scrolled back. September, October, there it was, an album posted on October 8th. The cover photo was Talia and Leo, grinning on a white sand beach, holding up coconut drinks. Her teeth, perfect and gleaming, were on full display in every single selfie. The location tag, Cancun. The caption, "Surprise getaway. Leo is the best. Siama blessed hunter Cancun." The trip was 3 weeks after her dental emergency. "You lying bitch," I whispered to the empty kitchen. The emergency was a lie, a calculated, deliberate lie to fund her all-inclusive beach vacation, and I had paid for it. My hands were shaking, but not with sadness. It was rage, pure, unadulterated rage. I'd been a fool, their safety net, their responsible, practical, gullible fool. I closed the banking app. I opened a new Excel spreadsheet. I titled the document Reclaiming. In column A, I wrote service expense. In column B, monthly cost. In column C, annual cost. I started with the easy ones, the shared subscriptions I'd set up years ago to be nice. Netflix Family, I typed, $22.99. Shared with parents and Talia. Amazon Prime, $14.999. Both of them listed as household users. Spotify Premium Family, $69.99. Everyone on my account. Then the big ones. Verizon Family Plan. I logged into my account. The monthly bill was $322.80. My line and Elias's were only a fraction of that. The rest covered my parents and Talia. I did the math. Their portion, approximately $220. Richard Harrington gym membership. I had to search my email for that one. Dad had added himself to my LA Fitness account 2 years ago. $39.99 a month. He complained to me last week that they were raising the price. Then the loans, the $1,500 insurance, the $1,200 dental scam, a $500 car repair for my dad 6 months ago. On and on it went. The numbers on the screen blurred through the angry tears in my eyes. The monthly total for the recurring services alone was $313.96. Annually, $3,767.52. $3,777.52. That money could have funded Alara's swim team lessons she had begged for last summer. It could have paid for the furnace repair we'd been putting off. It was more than enough for Elias's advanced paramedic certification program, the one that would have guaranteed him a 30% raise. I stared at the total. I wasn't buying their love. I was buying their convenience. I was funding their lifestyles at the cost of my own children's future. Ugh. My finger hovered over the mouse. The quiet certainty of a lock finally clicking open settled over me. Not with drama, not with tears, just correction. I began with Netflix. I went to Manage Profiles. I clicked on my mother's icon, Delete Profile. A small pop-up asked, "Are you sure?" I clicked Delete Profile. Her icon vanished. I did the same for Talia and Leo. Amazon Prime was next. Manage Your Household. I saw their names. Cynthia Harrington, adult. Talia, adult. I clicked Remove, and again Remove. They were gone. Spotify was just as easy. Manage Family Plan. Remove member, remove member. The Verizon website was, as I'd expected, a nightmare. It took me 45 minutes of navigating deliberately obtuse menus to find the transfer of service option. I initiated the transfer for 3 lines: Cynthia Harrington, Richard Harrington, and Talia. I listed them as the new account owners. They would get the bill and the notification in the morning. By 3 a.m., I was on a roll. The gym membership was the most satisfying. I logged into the portal. Richard Harrington. I clicked Cancel Membership. The site offered me a 3-month discount. I clicked No, thanks, cancel. It offered me a free personal training session. I clicked Cancel Membership. A confirmation screen popped up. Your membership will be terminated at the end of the billing cycle. When I finished, the room felt lighter. I went back to my spreadsheet. I added a new column, Status. Against every single line item, I typed Canceled. I created a new document, a Word doc. I copied the spreadsheet. I added screenshots of the loans, the $1,200 transfer, the $500 insurance payment. I saved it. Reclaiming, evidence. I printed a copy and slid it into a simple blue folder. The kitchen light flickered on. Elias stood in the doorway, his hair rumpled from sleep, concern etching lines around his eyes. "Miranda, it's 5 a.m. He moved to the kettle, saw the full coffee pot, and poured himself a mug. "You okay?" "I think I will be," I answered. My voice was hoarse. I turned the laptop screen toward him. He leaned against the counter, sipping the coffee, and studied the Reclaiming spreadsheet. He read every line. His face was unreadable for a long moment. Then he looked up at me, and there was no surprise in his eyes, only a deep, profound sadness. "I have wanted you to do this for a decade," he said quietly. The words hung in the air. "A decade? Why didn't you ever say anything? Why didn't you stop me?" "It wasn't my battle to fight, baby," he said, setting the mug down. He came over and put his hands on my shoulders, his paramedic's grip grounding me. "I married you. That means I married your family, baggage and all. I could tell you how I felt, but I could never be the one to tell you to do this. You had to get here on your own." He nodded toward the screen. What made tonight different? The memory surfaced instantly, so sharp it stole my breath. "The look on Alara's face," I whispered, my throat tightening, when she was clutching her handmade card, when she watched Trevor throw his Apple Watch box on the floor like it was trash. The pride in her eyes, it just died. I looked up at him, my own eyes burning. "I won't let them make our children feel less than anymore, Elias. Never again." He pulled me into a hug and I buried my face in his chest, finally letting the tears come. He just held me, stroking my hair. "There's going to be fallout," he warned gently, his voice rumbling against my ear. "A nuclear winter. Your mother doesn't handle being told no." "I know." I pulled back and wiped my face, taking a deep, shuddering breath. "I printed a copy of everything. It's in the blue folder on the counter." Good. You'll need it." He kissed my forehead. "Let's get some sleep. We'll need it. The war begins at dawn." He helped me close the laptop, and I left the blue reclaiming folder sitting in the center of the kitchen table, like a declaration of independence. I woke at 8 a.m. to the sound of angry buzzing. My phone was vibrating itself across the nightstand like an enraged hornet. I ignored it. Downstairs, I could hear the kids. Alara and Julian were arguing happily about cartoons, the sound of spoons clinking against cereal bowls. The smell of fresh coffee filled the air. Elias was already up making breakfast, the picture of calm. The buzzing stopped. Then, immediately, began again and again. I finally picked it up. 47 missed calls, 12 from Mom, 10 from Dad, 25 from Talia. Then the text started, a rapid-fire assault. Mom, "Carolyn Harrington, what have you done?" Mom, "My phone isn't working. I can't call Brenda. Fix this." Talia, "Mom is crying, hysterical. What is wrong with you? Fix this now." Dad, "Your mother is beside herself. This is unacceptable, Miranda. Call me immediately." Talia, "My Netflix is gone? My Spotify? Are you insane?" Talia, "You canceled Dad's gym membership? Are you poor? Is that it?" I placed the phone face down on the granite counter, poured myself a mug of coffee, and took a sip. For the first time in my life, I actually tasted it. The rich, dark warmth slid down my throat, while the chaos I had unleashed vibrated silently against the stone. "That bad?" Elias asked, glancing at my upturned phone from the stove where he was flipping pancakes. "That good," I corrected, feeling oddly, dangerously serene. The moment was shattered by a sudden, frantic pounding on our front door. Not a knock, a fist. Elias and I exchanged a look. "Already?" he murmured. The pounding came again, louder. "Miranda, open this door. I know you're in there." It was Talia. I glanced at Elias. He nodded, already moving to stand in the hallway just out of sight. I took a deep breath and opened the door. Talia stood on the porch, but she wasn't the raging harpy from her texts. Her face was pale, her eyes red and puffy. She wasn't wearing any makeup, and her hair was thrown into a messy bun. She looked distraught. "Miranda," she whispered, her voice cracking. "Oh my God, Miranda, I'm so sorry." I just stared at her, my hand tight on the doorknob. This was not the attack I had braced for. "Sorry for what, Talia?" "For Christmas," she said, tears welling up. "You were right. I was a bitch. I wanted to show off for Leo's family, and I went too far, and I hurt you, and I hurt the kids. I'm so sorry." She looked past me into the house. And now Mom and Dad are going insane. Dad's screaming about his gym, and Mom can't call her friends. "You cut them off?" "I'm paying my own bills now," I said, my voice flat. I know, and you should," she said, nodding frantically. "I get it, I do. But Miranda, please. Mom she's losing it. I'm scared she's going to have a panic attack. I wanted to talk. Can I please just come in for a second? Please, I'm freezing." I hesitated. This was Talia, my sister. As much as I hated her right now, the lifetime of conditioning to fix her problems was hard to break. "Fine," I said, stepping aside. "1 minute." Thank you," she said, rushing past me into the kitchen. She wrung her hands, pacing in front of the table. "I shouldn't have brought those gifts. I was just trying to, I don't know, make you mad maybe. I'm a terrible person." It was the most honest thing I'd ever heard her say. A sliver of guilt pierced my anger. "Talia, can I get a glass of water?" she asked, her voice trembling. My throat is so dry from crying. Sure. I turned my back to her. I opened the cabinet, grabbed a glass, and went to the refrigerator for the water filter. I filled the glass, the sound of the water splashing echoing in the silent kitchen. Behind me, I heard a faint zip sound, like a purse. I turned around, holding the glass of water. Talia was standing by the door, her designer purse clutched in her hand. Her entire demeanor had changed. The tears were gone. Her eyes were cold and hard. "You know what?" she said, her voice suddenly crisp. "I should just go. This was a bad idea. I need to go check on Mom." Before I could say a word, she yanked the front door open and was gone. She ran down the walkway and jumped into her BMW, which was parked, engine running, at the curb. I stood there, holding the glass. My blood ran cold. I looked at the kitchen table. The blue folder was gone. "Elias!" I shouted. He was at my side in a second. "What? What happened?" "She took it," I whispered, staring at the empty spot on the table. "She stole it. The folder. The reclaiming folder. The whole thing was a lie. The tears, the apology. It was all a performance to steal the evidence." I ran to the window. Her car was already squealing around the corner at the end of the street. My God. I had underestimated her. I had underestimated all of them. This wasn't just dysfunction. This was war. I turned to Elias, my heart pounding with a new, terrifying clarity. She thinks she just won. She thinks she has the only copy. My phone rang in my hand. It was my father. I answered it. "Miranda Harrington." "What have you done, Miranda?" Richard's voice was a low growl. "Your mother is hysterical. We've been on the phone with the bank, the phone company. What is this?" "It's called paying your own bills, Dad. You should try it." There was a pause. He was clearly not expecting defiance. "You listen to me, young lady," he snarled. "You have been selfish and disrespectful. And now your mother is on the phone with the police. They are on their way to your house right now." He was trying to scare me, to bully me back into line. "The police?" I said, my voice dangerously calm. "What for, Dad? For not paying your phone bill?" "What's the crime?" "The crime," he said, his voice dripping with triumph, "is theft, hacking, fraud. You'll see." The line went dead. I looked at Elias. "Dad says Mom called the cops. They're on their way." Elias's eyes widened. "What? Can they do that?" A cold, hard smile touched my lips. "She took the bait," I said. "What bait?" I walked over to our small home office desk in the corner of the living room. I knelt and punched the code into the small, fireproof safe we kept under the desk. The door clicked open. I reached inside and pulled out a second blue folder. It was identical to the first. "She stole a decoy," I said, holding it up. "The one she took? It just had the subscription printouts. This one has the bank statements, the $200 transfer, the property insurance bill, the screenshots of her Cancun trip." I stood up just as the sound of a car door slamming echoed outside. "I backed everything up to the cloud last night," I said, walking to the door. "And I printed a second copy. It's locked in here. They think they're coming here to ambush me. They have no idea what they're walking into." I opened the front door just as my parents' Lexus pulled up, tires crunching on the snow. A moment later, a Wyoming police cruiser pulled in behind them. My parents, Richard and Cynthia, stormed up the walkway. My mother looked performatively distraught, dabbing at her dry eyes with a tissue. My father looked righteous, his jaw set in a line of pure indignation. 2 police officers got out of the cruiser. The older one had a weary look on his face. The younger one, Officer Murray, looked embarrassed. Clearly not the emergency he'd been expecting on a Sunday morning. "That's her, officers," Cynthia cried, pointing a dramatic, trembling finger at me. "That's my daughter, Miranda. She hacked all our accounts. She stole our services, our phones, our television, everything. She's locked us out of our own lives." Officer Murray cleared his throat. "Ma'am, can you explain the situation?" "Certainly, officer," I said, my voice the very picture of calm. I stepped back from the door. Please, come in, it's cold out." The officers stepped into the entryway, wiping their boots on the mat. My parents hovered in the doorway as if they were vampires needing an invitation into a home they no longer had access to. "Would anyone like some coffee?" I asked. "This is not a social call, Miranda," Richard snapped. "I'll take one, ma'am, thank you," Officer Murray said, giving my father a sideways glance. His partner declined. I went to the kitchen, poured a mug, and handed it to him. Elias stood silently in the hallway, arms crossed, a solid, unmovable presence. "Now, ma'am," the older officer said, "your mother is alleging hacking and theft." "I understand," I said. "And I didn't hack anything." I walked to the safe, which I had left open. I retrieved the second blue folder. I walked back to the kitchen table and opened it, spreading the papers across the surface for them to see. "These are all my accounts, officer," I explained, my finger tapping the first page. "As you can see, this is the Verizon bill. It is in my name, Miranda Harrington. This is the Amazon Prime account, my name. Netflix, my name. The gym membership, my credit card. I have been paying for all of my family's services for years. Last night, I simply decided to stop." I pushed the stack of printed bank statements toward them. I did not steal any services. I simply canceled services that I was paying for. The phone lines, for example. I didn't cancel them. I initiated a transfer of service to my parents and my sister. They are now responsible for their own bills. The older officer scanned the documents, his eyes moving quickly over the highlighted names and account numbers. He nodded slowly. "Looks in order." He turned to my parents, who were now standing dumbfounded in the middle of my kitchen. "Sir, ma'am," he said, his voice firm, "this appears to be a civil family matter, not a criminal complaint. These accounts are, as she said, legally in your daughter's name. She is fully entitled to cancel any service she pays for." But she did it without warning," Cynthia protested, her voice rising to a shriek. "We were in the middle of a show. Richard missed his golf tournament broadcast. My phone just died." The two officers exchanged another long-suffering glance. "Ma'am, that is not a police matter," Officer Murray said, setting his empty mug down. "We recommend you work this out as a family." They excused themselves with polite, apologetic nods toward me and Elias. As they walked out, I heard the older one mutter to his partner, "Family, every damn time." I followed my parents onto the porch, the cold air hitting my face. They stood there, momentarily defeated, their primary weapon, public shaming via law enforcement, having failed spectacularly. "How could you?" Cynthia whispered, her face pale. "Family doesn't do this to each other." "You're right, Mom," I said, my fingers gripping the doorframe. "Family doesn't do this. Family doesn't take advantage of one child to spoil the other. Family doesn't call the police on their own daughter when their free ride gets canceled. Family doesn't call it love when what they really mean is ATM. After everything we have done for you," Richard boomed, his anger returning. He pointed a thick finger at me. "The braces, the college tuition." "Which I paid back, Dad," I interrupted softly, "with interest. And I have been paying you back ever since, every single month for the last 10 years. That stops today." They stared at me, truly seeing me for the first time, not as responsible Miranda, not as their safety net, but as a stranger. They left in a storm of slammed Lexus doors and squealing tires, throwing up a spray of slush onto the sidewalk. I closed the door, my entire body trembling. Elias was right there. He didn't say anything, just pulled me into his arms. Why were the police here? We both froze. Ilara and Julian were peering from behind the staircase, their eyes wide with fear. I pulled away from Elias and knelt. "Grandma and Grandpa were upset about something," I said, keeping my voice calm. "A grown-up disagreement about phone bills. The police just came to explain that everything is fine." "Are we in trouble?" Julian whispered. "No, honey," I said, pulling them both into a hug. "Not at all. Sometimes adults just They need to be reminded of the rules. By afternoon, the family group chat, a digital space I usually kept muted, lit up like Christmas morning all over again. Cynthia posted first, a long, rambling message about being heartbroken and betrayed. This is not how we raised her. We gave her everything. To be treated this way in our golden years is a shock I don't know if I'll recover from. Talia, predictably, added the fuel. I can't believe my own sister ruined Christmas, called the police on her own parents, a magnificent lie, and has now left us all without phones, all because she's jealous. You can't make this stuff up. Some people are just toxic. My phone buzzed with private messages. Uncle George. What's going on, Miranda? Your mom is a wreck. I began typing a response, my fingers flying, ready to defend myself, ready to post the spreadsheets for all to see. Then, an unexpected message appeared in the main chat. It was from Aunt Josephine, my father's sister. She was always the quiet one, never took sides. Good for you, Miranda. The entire chat went silent. A moment later, a thumbs-up reaction appeared on Josephine's message. From my cousin Sabrina. Within an hour, both Cynthia and Talia had left the chat. Sir. My phone buzzed again, a private call. Aunt Josephine, I answered, my heart pounding. Miranda? Hi, Aunt Josephine. I meant what I said in that chat, she said, her voice warm but no nonsense. It's about time someone stood up to your mother and sister. They've been running this family like their own private bank for as long as I can remember. You knew? Knew. She let out a dry laugh. Honey, I was Talia's test run. Did you know that? 3 years ago, she called me, hysterical. Said her car transmission blew and she needed $800 for the repair, just until Leo's bonus came in. Said she was stranded. I gripped the phone. And you paid her. Like a fool, Josephine said. A week later, I saw pictures on Facebook, her and Leo on a 7-day Caribbean cruise. I called her on it. She told me I was crazy and that the dates were wrong. Then she blocked me. My blood boiled. She pulled the same thing on me, Aunt Jo, a $200 emergency dental bill in September. Let me guess, Josephine said. A month later, sunny vacation? Cancun, I whispered. I found the pictures on Instagram last night. There was a pause on the line. Miranda, she said, her voice dropping, I work part-time as a travel agent to keep busy. Just a little remote work for a local agency. Yeah? Your sister is not smart, Miranda. She booked that cruise 3 years ago using her own name. Give me 10 minutes. What was the date of that transfer? September 15th, I said. And the vacation? Early October, around the 8th. Give me 10 minutes, she said again and hung up. My hands were shaking. I paced the kitchen, my mind racing. What if I could prove it? Not just with Instagram photos she could delete, but with cold, hard facts. My phone chimed with an email notification. The sender, Josephine Harris. The subject, that thing we talked about. I ran to my laptop and opened the email. Miranda. Your sister is a creature of habit, and, as I said, not smart. She booked her trip through our agency's online portal. I looked up the records. She booked an all-inclusive 5-night stay at the Royal Sands Resort in Cancun. She paid the deposit on August 1st. She called you for emergency money on September 15th. The final payment for the trip was processed on September 17th. Attached is the booking confirmation PDF and the payment history. Use them well. Love, Aunt Jo. I clicked the attachment. There it was, irrefutable, black and white, Talia Harrington's name, the flight itinerary, the resort name, and the dates. Booked, August 1st. Final payment, September 17th. She had called me crying her fake tears. After she had already booked the trip, specifically to get the money to pay for the trip. This wasn't just selfishness. This wasn't just taking advantage. This was calculated, premeditated fraud. I now had an irrefutable smoking gun. The blue folder in my safe was no longer just about canceled subscriptions. It was an indictment. That evening, after the kids were in bed, the house felt quiet. Not the tense walking on eggshells quiet I was used to, but a deep, peaceful quiet. Elias and I sat at the kitchen table. The reclaiming spreadsheet was still open on my laptop. "She committed fraud, Elias," I said, showing him the email from Aunt Josephine. "She planned it." He read the email, his face hardening. "Wow, that's next level." "What are you going to do with this?" "I'm going to hold on to it," I said, saving the PDF to my desktop and backing it up to the cloud. "This is my insurance policy. This is the break glass in case of emergency file." I closed the spreadsheet. I opened a new one. I titled this one, "Our Future." "Look at this," I said, typing. "Monthly amount reclaimed, $313.96. I created a new list. Item, swimming lessons, Ilara and Julian. Cost, $180 a month. "It's covered," I whispered, a slow smile spreading across my face. "We can do it. We can sign them up tomorrow." Elias leaned over the keyboard. "Add this. Item, Advanced Paramedic Certification Program, tablet and fees. Cost, $75 month, payment plan." "Done," I said, typing it in. Item, Weekend Getaway, Devil's Creek, Spring. Cost, $50 month, savings. We laughed as the list grew, our no-guilt budget. The numbers added up almost to the penny, to the exact amount I had been hemorrhaging to my family for years. "What do we do now?" Elias asked, his hand warm on mine. "About your parents." "We wait," I answered, closing the laptop. "We didn't take anything that wasn't ours. We just stopped giving what was never appreciated. The ball is in their court." The next 2 weeks were a masterclass in psychological warfare. The counteroffensive, denied a direct assault, turned into a guerrilla smear campaign. The first shot came from my Aunt Beatrice, my mother's sister, a concerned phone call. "Miranda, dear, I just spoke to your mother. She is simply devastated. She told me you're having some serious financial troubles. If you and Elias need a loan, dear, you just have to ask. You don't have to, well, act out like this." "We're fine, Aunt Beatrice," I said, my teeth clenched. "Thank you for your concern." Then came a text from my cousin, Jessica. "Hey, heard you're going through a tough time. Mom said you had a bit of a breakdown at Christmas. Just want you to know I'm here for you if you need to talk." The most stunning, however, came at the grocery store. Brenda, my mother's bridge partner, stopped me in the produce aisle. "Miranda, dear," she said, her voice dripping with faux sympathy as she cornered me by the tomatoes. "Carolyn is just sick with worry. It's such a shame about Elias. I had no idea he was so controlling, forcing you to cut off your own family. It's just tragic." I placed each tomato into my cart with deliberate, slow care. I fought the white-hot urge to list every one of my mother's financial demands right there by the avocados. "That's not remotely true, Brenda," I said instead, my voice steady and cold. "But thanks for your concern." That evening, Elias's parents called. Unlike my family, they rarely interfered, which made their concern feel genuine. "Elias," his mother began, her voice hesitant, "we've been hearing some strange things from a distant cousin of Cynthia's. Something about you two having money problems. That Miranda cut her parents off." Elias put the phone on speaker. "Mom," he said, squeezing my hand, "Miranda's not having a breakdown and we're not having money problems. She's finally standing up for herself. My family has been, well, they've been taking advantage of her for years. She just put a stop to it." There was a long sigh on the other end of the line. "Oh, thank the Lord," his mother said, her voice flooded with relief. "Elias, your father and I, we've been worried about this for years. We never said anything. It wasn't our place. But the way they treated her, we're proud of you, Miranda. It's about time." The validation from his family soothed a raw, wounded part of me that the rumors had scratched open. A few days later, a single text message appeared. It was from Cynthia. "Are we still invited to the children's winter recital next Tuesday?" I stared at the screen. The question hovered, a perfect blend of olive branch and emotional manipulation. It wasn't, "I'm sorry." It wasn't, "Can we talk?" It was a test to see if I would crack, if I would jump at the chance to smooth things over, to sacrifice my boundaries for the sake of family. The old Miranda would have replied in seconds. "Of course, Mom, please come, we'll save you seats." I let the text sit, for one day, then two, for a full week. I let it sit there, a glowing 1 on my message icon, and I went about my life. I signed Alara and Julian up for swim lessons. I helped Elias order his tablet. Finally, on Monday, the day before the recital, I picked up the phone. I typed, deleted, and retyped my response. Finally, I wrote, "Yes, it's at 7 p.m. at the elementary school. Please be on time so you don't disrupt the children's performances. And please, no gifts." The reply came seconds later, a single angry period. My stomach tightened, but I didn't second-guess myself. That night, I was helping Alara practice her recorder solo for the 5th time. She was getting frustrated, and the high-pitched notes were grating on my last nerve. "One more time, sweetie. You've almost got it." She lowered the recorder and looked at me, her face suddenly serious. "Mom, why is Grandma saying mean things about you to Aunt Talia?" My heart stopped. "What? What did you hear, honey?" "I was at their house last week," she said. "What? When?" "Dad dropped me off for an hour, remember? To get that book I left?" "Oh, right, I forgot." "What did you hear?" "I was in the bathroom," Alara said, her eyes fixed on her sheet music. "And Grandma was on the phone with Aunt Talia. She didn't know I was there. She said you were being selfish and ungrateful and cruel. She said you were trying to hurt her." I sat down on her bed, my anger at my mother so potent I could barely breathe. To talk like that, knowing her granddaughter was in the house. I gathered my words, forcing myself to be calm. Sometimes, sweetheart, adults have very different ideas about what's fair. Grandma and I were working through something difficult. Her eyes, so much like mine, searched my face. Is it because we didn't get big presents, like Trevor? The question pierced me. "No, baby, absolutely not," I said, brushing the hair from her forehead. It's because adults need to have boundaries too, just like you have rules at school." "What's a boundary?" I thought for a moment. "You know how your classmate, Jason, kept taking your art supplies without asking? And you got upset?" She nodded vigorously. "And Mrs. Preston had to tell him he wasn't allowed to touch your things unless you said it was okay?" "Yeah, she made him stop," Alara said, a hint of satisfaction in her voice. "Well, that's a boundary," I said. "It's a rule that tells people how they're allowed to treat you, and sometimes even grown-ups need to tell other grown-ups to stop taking their things." Understanding dawned on her face. "Did Grandma take your things?" "Something like that," I answered carefully. "But we're figuring it out. Now one more time from the top. You're going to be amazing tomorrow." The night of the recital arrived with the winter's first real blizzard. White flakes drifted past the elementary school's floodlights as we streamed into the warm, loud auditorium. Alara clutched her recorder, her fingers white. Julian bounced on his toes, his handmade tree costume, which Elias had spent hours crafting from felt and pipe cleaners, crinkling loudly. "Is Grandma here? Is Grandpa?" Julian asked, scanning the growing crowd. "I don't know, honey. I don't see them," I said, my stomach churning. "There's Trevor," he pointed. I looked. My sister's family had just arrived. Talia waved theatrically, a bright, fake smile plastered on her face. Leo and her sons looked bored, but no sign of my parents. "Places, everyone." The teacher, Ms. Preston, clapped her hands, herding the children backstage. I squeezed Alara's shoulder. "You'll do great. Deep breaths. I'll be right in the front row." Elias and I found seats. The lights dimmed at 7 p.m. on the dot. The principal made his usual bad jokes. The kindergartners sang their song about snowflakes, and it was adorable. 7:15 p.m. No sign of them. I started to relax. Maybe they'd respected my boundary. Maybe they'd just stayed home. Just as the third-grade choir arrangement of Winter Wonderland swelled, a commotion erupted at the back of the auditorium. The heavy doors banged open, letting in a shaft of bright hallway light. My parents. They weren't quiet. They didn't slip in. They made an entrance. Cynthia, in her pearls, and Richard, looking annoyed, forced an entire row of people to stand up, shuffling and grumbling as they squeezed past to the 2 seats I'd saved on the aisle. Sorry, Richard mumbled, not sounding sorry at all. My stomach dropped, but it wasn't just their late, disruptive arrival that made me sick. It was what they were carrying, and what Talia, who was sliding in behind them, was also carrying. Glossy, glittering gift bags. At least 4 of them. They were going to do it. They were going to defy my no gifts rule, and they were going to do it here. Publicly. In front of my children, my friends, and the entire school. Julian's class play was first. He was an adorable, shuffling tree, and he remembered all his lines. When Alara's recorder ensemble took the stage, her eyes scanned the crowd until she found mine. I gave her an encouraging nod. She took a deep breath and played her solo, Ode to Joy, without a single mistake. Pride swelled in my chest, so fierce and bright it temporarily displaced the dread. After the final bow, the families flooded into the cafeteria for the traditional punch and cookies. The room was loud, hot, and smelled like sugar. I was helping Miss Preston arrange the refreshment table when I saw them. Talia, flanked by my parents, was making a beeline for Alara and Julian. She held 2 large, glittering bags. "There are my stars," Talia announced, her voice pitched to carry over the din. I intercepted her. I physically stepped between my sister and my children. "Hi, Talia. Hi, Mom, Dad. Glad you could make it." My voice was quiet, pleasant. "We brought something special for the performers," Talia said, ignoring me and trying to angle past me toward Alara. "Talia, no," I said just as quietly. But I didn't move. "We talked about this. We said no gifts." Talia's smile tightened. "Oh, Miranda, don't be ridiculous," she hissed, her voice low, but several nearby parents turned to look. "They're just little tokens. Don't be so controlling. You're making a scene." "I'm not the one making a scene," I said, my voice still even. "The no gifts rule wasn't a suggestion. Please respect that. We can visit next weekend if you'd like to spend time with them." "This is insane," she snapped, her voice rising. "You are punishing the children because you're angry at us. That is twisted, Miranda." The conversation around us died. Everyone was watching. My palms were sweating, but I planted my feet. I would not be moved. "Bien." "The children are doing wonderfully," I responded, my voice clear and calm in the sudden quiet. "They know they're loved. They don't need expensive gifts to prove it. They need grandparents and an aunt who respect their parents' rules." I looked past her to my mother. "Don't you, Mom?" Cynthia flinched, her face pale. She was clearly torn. This was not the scene she had envisioned. She wanted to be the benevolent, gift-giving grandmother, not the co-conspirator in a cafeteria showdown. Talia stared at me, her face contorted with a rage that was so ugly it was startling. She'd expected me to fold, to be embarrassed by the public attention and back down. She had miscalculated. For a long, tense moment, we were locked in a stalemate. Me, calm. Her, furious. Finally, she let out a sound of pure disgust. "Fine, whatever." "This is ridiculous." She turned, her heels clicking angrily, and stormed out of the cafeteria, the 2 glittering gift bags still clutched in her manicured hands. Richard, after shooting me a glare that would have crushed me just weeks ago, followed her. But my mother... Cynthia lingered. She stood there watching as Alara helped a kindergartner reach the cookie tray. She watched as Julian showed his tree costume to a classmate, both of them giggling. They worked so hard, Cynthia whispered, her voice smaller than I had ever heard it. She wasn't looking at me. She was looking at her grandchildren. Yes, I said, my anger softening just a fraction. Yes, they did. She hesitated, then her hand darted out and touched my arm, a brief, light touch. They were very good. Then she turned and hurried after my father. The gesture wasn't an apology. It wasn't surrender. But it was something. Recognition, maybe. As I turned back to the cookie table, Ms. Z. Preston gave me a small, understanding smile. A moment later, another parent, Lisa Morgan, whose daughter was in Alara's class, came up to me. "That was amazing," she murmured, grabbing a napkin. "My mother-in-law floods us with so much plastic junk every holiday and we're drowning in it. It's refreshing to see someone actually set a limit." For the first time since this battle began, I felt a strange lightness, not vindication, but validation. 3 days later, the doorbell rang. Sunday morning. I was in the kitchen nursing my first cup of coffee while the kids were upstairs deep in a pillow fort building project. Elias glanced at me from behind his newspaper, eyebrows raised. "Expecting anyone?" "Not a soul," I murmured. The bell rang again, more insistent this time. 2 sharp, impatient rings, my mother's signature. I opened the door to find both my parents on the porch. They looked grim. Dad's jaw was set in that familiar, stubborn line. Mom clutched her purse to her chest like a shield. "We need to talk," Dad declared. He didn't wait for an invitation. He just pushed past me into the living room. Mom followed, her expensive perfume leaving a trail of reproach. "This has gone on long enough, Miranda." I closed the door with deliberate slowness, counting to 5 in my head. My pulse was quickening, my throat tightening. The old panic was rising. "Don't make them mad. Just smooth it over." I pushed the feeling down. "You should have called first," I said, my voice sharp. Dad planted himself in the center of our modest living room, surveying the kids' scattered toys with thinly veiled judgment. "We don't need to call first, Miranda. We are your parents." "And this is my house," I countered. He ignored me. "Do you have any idea how much we sacrificed for you?" he demanded, his voice rising. "The vacations we never took, the retirement accounts we had to borrow from for your braces, for your college. I worked 2 jobs when your father was laid off," Mom added, her voice wavering with practiced vulnerability. "We gave you everything." The familiar guilt rose like bile, but this time, something was different. The guilt receded, replaced by the same cold clarity from the night I'd canceled everything. "And I've been paying that debt my entire adult life," I responded, my voice calm despite the tremor in my hands. "Not just with money, Mom, with my time, with my energy. I'm done." Elias appeared from the kitchen, coffee mug in hand. He didn't speak. He just came and stood behind me, close enough that I could feel his warmth. His presence was a silent, solid wall at my back. "I think it's time we discuss this properly," I continued. I walked to the safe under the desk. I punched in the code, retrieved the blue folder, and walked back to the coffee table. Dad scoffed. "What's this? More of your dramatics? A spreadsheet?" "This," I said, opening the folder, "is a record of every financial loan and service I've paid for over the past 10 years. I laid the first page on the table between us. The numbers stood in neat, irrefutable columns. "Here's the $1,500 for your property insurance, Dad, from 13 months ago. Here is the $500 for your car repair. Here is the running total for your gym membership, your phone, and Mom's phone. This column? This is emergency assistance and unpaid loans. The total, over 10 years, is $28,430. Dad stared at the page. His mouth opened, then closed. He looked like a fish, suddenly finding itself on dry land. His face, which had been ruddy with anger, was going pale. I never asked you to keep a list," he sputtered. "I've never asked for repayment. I said, my voice steady. But I'm not going to be lectured about sacrifice when I've been sacrificing my family's future to pay for your conveniences. Mom reached for the spreadsheet, her manicured fingers trembling. This can't be right. Oh, it's right, I said, and that's just my contributions. I pulled the second set of papers from the folder, the email from Aunt Josephine, the booking confirmation, the payment history. This, I said, laying it on top of the spreadsheet, is Talia's $200 emergency dental bill from September. She was in pain, Mom protested. It was an emergency. Was it? I asked. Because this is the booking confirmation for her 5-night all-inclusive vacation to Cancun, which she booked on August 1st. 6 weeks before, she called me, crying about her tooth. I tapped the payment history, and this shows her final payment for the trip went through on September 17th, 2 days after I sent her my $200. She scammed me, Mom. She lied to my face, and you both knew it, didn't you? Their silence was the only answer I needed. You've been enabling her, I said, my voice rising. And you've been using me, using responsible Miranda to clean up her messes, to pay her bills, while you both pretended she was just generous and I was just dramatic. That was the blow they couldn't defend. The evidence was absolute. This wasn't a he said, she said. It was black and white. All the color drained from my father's face. The righteous anger, the bluster, it all evaporated. He staggered back and sank heavily onto our couch, the leather creaking beneath him. He looked for the first time in his life old, defeated. I didn't realize, he mumbled, staring at the floor. I didn't know about the trip. She told us it was a last-minute deal. And you believed her, I stated, because it was easier to believe her than to ask questions. My mother just stood there, her hands twisting the strap of her purse. Her practiced vulnerability was gone, replaced by a raw, ugly shock. She was exposed. It's not about the money, Mom, I said, my voice softening, the anger draining away, leaving only exhaustion. Not really. It's about the pattern. It's about the years of taking and then making me feel guilty when I finally had nothing left to give. I sat on the arm of our sofa, across from my father. I felt a newfound authority settle over me, a stillness. So here's what's going to change, I said, my voice carrying a weight that surprised even me. This is not a negotiation. These are the new terms. Elias moved to stand beside me, his hand finding mine. 1. All financial expectations are over. You will not ask me for money. You will not ask me to cover a bill. You will not temporarily put something on my card. That is finished. We are focusing on our children's needs. Dad opened his mouth to interrupt, but I raised my hand, stopping him cold. 2. Equal treatment. I am done watching my children be treated as second-class citizens in this family. Either you treat my family and Talia's family with equal respect, or we will limit contact drastically. 3. You will respect our boundaries. When I say no gifts, it means no gifts. When I say please don't show up late, it means be on time. Our rules in our house with our children are law. You will respect them. I took a deep breath. And 4, you will never show up at this house unannounced again. You will call first. You will be invited. You are not entitled to my time or my home. The silence in the room was absolute, punctuated only by the soft ticking of the clock. Upstairs, a muffled giggle floated down, a reminder of exactly what I was fighting for. My father's shoulders slumped. We didn't see it as taking advantage, he said, his voice rough. We just thought, you're so capable, Miranda, Mom whispered, finally wiping at a real tear. You always handled everything. We let you. Being capable isn't a punishment, Mom, I said gently. Or at least it shouldn't be. It's not fair. It was never fair. "What about Talia?" Dad asked quietly, his gaze still on the floor. "That's between you and her," I answered, refusing the bait. "You can give her every dollar you have. I don't care, but you will not take it from me to do it. I'm only responsible for my family now." Mom nodded slowly, the reality finally sinking in. We might have favored her," she admitted, the words sounding strange and foreign, "without meaning to." "You did," I confirmed. The word was sharp, but necessary. "You did. But we can build something new now, something healthier. If you're willing to do the work." "So where does this leave us?" Dad asked, looking up. "That depends on you," I replied, closing the blue folder. "I've set my boundaries. The next step is yours." Mom looked at our clasped hands, then at Elias's steady, protective gaze, then back at my face. Something shifted in her expression. Respect. It was the first time I'd ever seen it. "We should go, Richard," she said quietly. Give everyone time to think." As they gathered themselves to leave, Emma appeared at the top of the stairs, Jake peering around her. "Grandma, Grandpa," Alara called, her voice full of confusion. "They were just leaving, sweetheart," I said, not moving from my spot. "They came by without calling first, so they can't stay." Mom paused at the door, her hand on the frame. She looked back at Alara, then at me. We'll call next time, Miranda," she said. It was the first real promise she'd ever made me. 6 months later, summer sunshine warmed my shoulders as I knelt in our new backyard garden. Alara was beside me, her small hands patting soil around a tomato seedling. The scent of fresh earth and mulch filled my lungs. Our house felt different, lighter. The phone didn't ring with urgent manufactured crises. My bank account was blessedly, boringly predictable. "Grandma called while you were at the store," Alara mentioned, her voice casual, but her eyes watching my reaction. "Oh yeah? What did she want?" I asked, brushing dirt from my palms. "She asked if me and Julian want to go fishing with Grandpa next weekend. She said, just us, not Trevor." I smiled. "Would you like that?" "Yeah," she grinned. "Grandpa says he'll teach me to bait my own hook." The doorbell chimed. I checked my watch. 2:01 p.m. Right on time. I opened the door to find my mother on the porch. She was holding a modest gift bag, not a glittering, oversized monstrosity. "I know we said no gifts," she began, her voice hesitant, "but I was cleaning the attic, and I found Alara's baby book. I thought you might want it." "Come in, Mom," I said, stepping aside. The old tension was gone. There was no invisible weight pressing on my shoulders as she crossed the threshold. The air between us was tentative, but clean. That evening, my phone buzzed with a text. It was from Dad. "Talia wants to know if you'll host 4th of July this year. The whole family." A year ago, that request would have triggered an automatic, resentful yes, followed by weeks of stress, preparation, and a massive bill. I smiled. I typed, "We're planning a small gathering with just the kids this year. Hope you guys have fun." No excuses, no lengthy justification, just a clear, simple boundary. Elias, reading over my shoulder, grinned. "A year ago, you would have said yes and been miserable for a month." "I finally realized I'm not responsible for everyone's happiness," I replied, setting the phone down. "Just ours." Our no-guilt budget had transformed our lives. The calendar on our fridge showed a new rhythm. The kids were now confident swimmers. Elias had passed his certification and gotten his 30% raise. We'd taken that weekend trip to Devil's Creek. We'd also started family counseling. Talia attended once, declared the therapist judgmental, and never returned. But my parents, they kept showing up. They were fumbling and it was imperfect, but they were trying. The biggest change, however, came just before Thanksgiving. My phone rang. It was Cynthia. "Miranda," she said, her voice clear, "your father and I are planning to make Thanksgiving dinner. We would be so honored if you, Elias, and the children would join us." She took a breath. "But We want you to know it's totally okay if you have other plans. We understand. Just let us know if you're comfortable with it." I looked at Elias, my eyes wide. He nodded, smiling. "We'd love to, Mom," I said. "What can we bring?" That night, long after the kids were asleep, I sat in the quiet living room with my journal. The house was peaceful, the only sound the gentle hum of the furnace we'd finally been able to repair. I wrote, "I couldn't make my family honest, but I could make my home fair. I couldn't stop them from taking, but I could stop myself from giving what was never respected. Love without boundaries isn't love, it's servitude. Real love, I'm learning, makes room for everyone to stand tall." I closed the book, listening to the sound of my children's even, peaceful breathing down the hall. I had finally given them and myself the greatest gift. It couldn't be wrapped, and it didn't glitter. It was the gift of self-respect. And it was worth more than all the gold in the world. If this story resonated with you, leave a like and consider subscribing. You can also drop any comment below, even just one word. Maybe tell me where you're watching from, or what time it is right now. Sometimes one word is enough to say you were here.